Hi, welcome to the Development and World Economic System lecture of the Marxian Economics course. This lecture is part of the lecture series created for the Middle Technical University Northern Cyprus campus. So, basically, in this part we will see first, different development theories and the Marxian the place of Marxian school inside of this development theories, and then a specific school which is called World System School, which can be taught within the Marxian economics, although it kind of pushes the boundaries of the Marxian economics also to some extent, beyond the traditional boundaries of the school itself. This is what we are going to do here, and in a way, actually, we will see development studied by mainstream economics, but we will also see many different views on development economics of Marxian economics also. So Marxian economics also is differing in its view on development. So as a starting point, let's start with the mainstream. So, first, what is development? Development is a field which in economics, which is studying how the developing countries, the low-income countries, could actually create growth and develop their economic systems. So basically, it is a field that is mostly in current world, at least, directed to them. Developing countries, not high-income countries, but low-income countries. Mainly, actually, the development and growth rates, the way the countries progress, was the main interest of Adam Smith, Ricardo, early economists. However, for the later economics, starting with the Great Depression of 1929, when almost one-third of the US GDP production level was lost, stability, maintaining what they already have, basically keeping what they already have, has been the main issue most the economists were interested in macroeconomics, at least. So development has become more like a issue of a side issue that is not to which actually the rich countries are not that much concerned on. And there were two different groups. One is structuralist. Structuralist is actually a sub group of the main of the Keynesian economics, Keynesian school. Basically, their main argument is in order to develop a country, create a growth in the country, it is necessary to basically change the structure of the economic system, as well as the institutions that are supporting the economic system. So when you have a structure that is actually not promoting growth, in that case, your country won't grow. It won't be actually. It won't actually catch up the relatively high-income countries. So you need to transform, in order to create growth, you need first transform your economic and system, and also some extra economic institutions in that sense. Neoclassical economics, which has a sub-school called New Economics, which is actually kind of kind of a school that is studying all macroeconomic issues. They mainly argue that if you make the markets work as good as possible, in that case you will get best possible results. Actually, one of the proponents of the school has argued this idea of the golden straitjacket. The states should be pretty much restricted on the economic policies they could implement. Basically, they should just the economic policies should be just be prepared according to a narrow receipt, and but that narrow receipt, if the states are restricted, that narrow receipt that is actually prepared by experts, obviously, of course, neoclassical experts that are arguing with, agreeing with the neoclassical ideas. In that case, the country will develop. In that case, the country will grow. Whether they will catch up with the developed countries, that's not the central question here. But if they don't do it at all, if they don't let market work at all, in that case, the countries will even fall more backward in the world economy, basically. And basically, the well, I should say the field became separate field after 1940, and that was because, as I said, after the crisis in 1930s, the interest of economic system has shifted. And then after 1940s, however, you had some countries that were relatively more high-income countries, wealthy countries, where poverty was a relatively small issue, which was more or less a distributional issue, maybe. But there were still countries that were relatively low income, and they need to develop and actually improve their production level. So that was that, and those countries become increasingly effective. Their voices were heard in the world academia, like East Asian countries, Eastern European countries, the Middle Eastern countries, African countries, Latin American countries. Their voices were not that much heard before 1940s, basically, but increasingly they were heard more, even though still the dominant voices belong to the developed countries. So a field was created to basically serve the needs of those countries. And the first receipt was basically called ISI. ISI is the short version of import substitution industrialization. So as I said, the structure of the economy is important, and if you have an economic system where you are actually producing just the primary goods, agricultural goods and mining goods, well, Ricardian theory actually easily show you might just maintain those two goods, and those two goods have a very highly unstable demand, which means actually your economy could never make investments that will lead to industrialization. Actually, this is also the argument of the Marxian school, the dependency school. But we should also note that the main problem the other main problem is when those countries who start with the mining and agricultural businesses start industrialization. Well, initially the amount of goods they produce will be low scale, and assuming the international companies are also able to sell their products freely in their own countries and in the whole world, those countries will be a significant disadvantage, both in domestic markets, for example, Argentinian companies in Argentina itself, and Argentinian companies in the rest of the world won't be able to sell their products to the rest of the world, because they are producing at low scales, the cost will be high. And the cost might also be high because all other industries are also lacking, so inputs are also high, and the efficiency level at low level of production might be also very low, so that might also increase the costs and prices. As a result, ISI argues that the country should, it could not start industrialization in many different sectors, but it should select certain target industries, and it should close the borders of the country to the outputs produced by those industries by the foreign companies. So in that way, it will protect the domestic companies. It might also subsidize the products of the domestic countries by basically financially helping those factories, which might decrease the cost of the. Allow those companies to decrease the cost of their products. Since part of their cost of production is paid by the government, and maybe this funding might be created by taxing the sales of the mining and agricultural goods that are sold to the foreign countries. So in a way, you use the sectors that are able to sell their output to the foreign countries, and with that money you finance industrialization in particular sectors. As a result, the domestic market of your country will be open for the companies that are selling those operating in that industry, and they want to compete with the foreign companies in the domestic market. As a result, those companies will be able to grow, increase their production level, and at some point they will be developed enough to compete with the foreign companies. At that moment, all the protections to those industries will be removed, and now new industries will be basically supported. As a result, the outputs that were previously imported to that developing country will be one by one substituted by the industries that are supported by the government, basically. So this is ISI. It was actually used it was a policy that was applied very widespread in different countries, in Latin America especially, but also in Turkey before 1980s. After 1970s and 80s, however, ISI policies started to change, and that change was created. There is a new set of policies were adapted, and those policies were called Washington Consensus. Well, Washington Consensus is not a consensus of all countries. It is just consensus of the leading economic institutions like World Bank, IMF. So it is kind of the consensus of the, let's say, economic elite experts, not the people whom they will kind of enforce their policies, basically, because those policies were mostly enforced after those countries entered the crisis, and on condition to save those countries economically, they should apply Washington Consensus policies. So what was the Washington Consensus? Mainly, the idea was the ISI was, well, that was the critique to the ISI. ISI was actually, first, it is punishing the industries, the very sectors that were able to sell their products to foreign countries. So it, in a way, prevents the sectors that were productive enough to compete internationally, the agriculture and mining sector, to develop, to make more investments, to produce even more output, or even at a lower cost. The second thing is, when state is actually supporting certain companies in a certain sector and protect it artificially, those sectors will, according to this critique, never develop, because they will depend on this protection, and in the end, actually, they will politically pressure the government to never remove those protections. So in the end, because lack of those protections, those companies will always have lower quality products and basically even higher prices, since they are protected from the foreign products that have lower prices. So if you want those companies to develop, you need to actually remove those boundaries. And when you remove those boundaries, basically, those companies will need to compete with the foreign companies, so they will be enforced to increase their productivity. That's good for those companies, and also those companies will able to have funding to build maybe a sufficiently large company, because the agricultural and mining businesses, they will have more profits, and they will be able to put those profits to the bank. Part of it they will invest, part of it maybe they provide funding for the other sectors, and those other sectors could use those fundings. So basically, if you leave everything to the market, if you open your country to the international trade and basically even international capital mobility, so that the capital can come to your country when it's most appropriate country to invest in that case, your country will grow much faster. So that's the second model. There is a third model, East Asian model, or the export-led growth model. I will talk on that model in the second part. I will also a little bit talk more on the overall on all three models in general in the next part. So see you in the next part.